Nabasa mo na, sino ba ang nagsabi? Ano pa ang nangyari? May balita, may balita. Sino ang titindig? Ano-ano ang panig? Sino ang magbabantay sa kulang at labis? Kung hindi balita, busan lang nagbabalita. Kung hindi ang balita, may busan lang nagbabalita. Kung ipikit ang mata, di ko mang bibig, sarili muna. Dahil ang tao ang kwento, yan ang kwenta ng kwenta. Kung sila ang balita, mas totoo ang balita. Ang tiwala ng bayan, ang ating sandigan. Kaya nating harapin, kahit peligro o banta. Kung ang balita ay malaya't matapat, ang bayan ay walaya't maulay. Mahirap man ang daan sa malayang pamamahayag, titindig isang hanay, sama-sama sabay-sabay sa malayang balita, sa malayang balita. ang nagsabi? Ano pa ang nangyari? May balita, may balita. Sino ang titindig? Ano-ano ang panig? Sino ang magbabantay sa kulang at labis? Kung hindi ang balita, may busan lang nagbabalita. Kung hindi ang balita, may busan lang nagbabalita. Huwag ipikit ang mata, tikom ang bibig, sarili muna. Dahil ang tao ang kwento, yan ang kwenta ng kwenta. Kung sila ang balita, mas totoo ang balita. Ang tiwala ng bayan, ang ating sandigan. Kaya nating harapin, kahit peligro o banta. Kung ang balita ay malaya't matapat, ang bayan ay balay at maulad. Mahirap man ang daan sa malayang pamamahayag. Titindig isang hanay, sama-sama sabay-sabay sa malayang balita. Sa malayang balita.
second National Conference on Investigative Journalism is timely. It comes at a critical juncture. In 6 months, we will be voting for a new president. At stake in the 2022 presidential election is nothing less than the future of our democracy. Dear friends, democracy is on the ballot.
Not since 1986 have elections and an independent press been so critical to our democracy and our life as a nation. As in 1986, we will be making critical decisions as journalists and as citizens about our democratic future. When the history of this era is going to be written, our role as journalists will be examined. History will judge us.
This can be the worst of times for journalists. We're being easily demonized. Lies and falsehoods spread faster than facts. And our profession is being devalued in the eyes of many. But the worst of times can also be the best of times. Because this is when we are most needed. This is when we must step up to perform our duty as fact gatherers and truth tellers.
From the time of dictator Ferdinand Marcos up to the present under President Rodrigo Duterte, investigative journalists have uncovered so many instances of injustice, fraud, government and business scandals, and illegal dealings. Investigative journalists hold the powerful accountable and give voice to the powerless by reporting wrongdoings in government, business, and even in local communities.
It becomes incredibly important that you do investigative journalism in the world we live in today, when weapons of mass destruction, and that's a great book you should read, are creating emergent human behavior that gives incentives to the worst of what we can be. We in the Philippines know that, but know that we're also not alone. This is a global problem. So thank you for coming together. Thank you to PCIJ. Hello, Sheila and Marites, and everyone else there. It is it's a new age, and whether our democracy survives will depend on what you do.
Magandang araw po sa kanilang lahat. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. It's a pleasure to be with all of you dito sa final plenary ng ating National Investigative Journalism Conference. Before anything else, this has been running for a few days already. We'd like to congratulate the PCIJ. We'd like to thank the National Endowment for Democracy and everybody who's participated so far. Dito po sa session na to, we're now running at around 83 and counting, pataas ng pataas. This would include journalists from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. We'd also like to acknowledge students from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, the West Visayas State University, UP in Diliman, Los Baños, Visayas, and Cebu, the University of Santo Tomas, Centro Escolar University, the University of Mindanao, Digos College, and the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines. And kung mayroon pa ako hindi nabanggit, pasensya na po. But we just like to thank everyone. This particular session is being sponsored by Wag Kukurap. Wag Kukurap is an informal coalition of journalists that was put together just a couple of months ago, basically to try to improve and to commit ourselves, not just to improve, but to commit ourselves to the best journalism that we can offer as we cover the campaign heading into the national elections in May 2022. This session hopes to amplify that need for critical and responsible journalism and for greater collaboration in this election period. Mamaya po, pag-uusap tayo, we'll have a panel discussion among some esteemed colleagues of ours. But before that, let's talk a bit more about Wag Kukurap and our objectives there. Meron tayong maliit na video dito, courtesy of Save Gregorio. Save, along with James Relativo and the rest of Philstar.com's Anyare team, put this together. Anyari, of course, is a fortnightly Filipino language web show produced by philstar.com that tackles the biggest issues that the country faces. Panoorin po muna natin to.
No to fake news! No to bias media! No to fake news!
Anong kaguluhan yun sa labas? Ha? Parang rally ata. Rally? Laban kanino?
Ayaw namin sa fake news ninyo, mga bayarang bias media! Oo! Tama!
Fake news? Bayaran? Bias media? Ba't magalit-galit yung ilan sa trabaho natin? Oo nga. Hindi ba nila gets ang ginagawa natin? Kapag mapagmatsyag at kritikal ang pagbabalita tuwing eleksyon, bias na? Alamin natin. Anyari?
Sa totoo lang, wala namang taong walang bias. Lahat ng tao may kanya-kanyang opinion at values na pinahawakan. Newsflash, tao lang naman din ang mga journalist. Pero ang ibig sabihin ba nito, unethical agad ang media practitioner kung may paninindigan?
Para sa mga Pinoy na journalist na in-interview sa isang 2019 study, hindi na maiiwasan ang bias sa pagpili at pag-prioritize sa mga storya. Sabi nga ng isang program manager para sa isang newscast, wala namang journalist na walang prinsipyo, pero magagawa niyang maging patas.
At ang pagiging patas ang isa sa mga itinutulak ng bagong ethical guide na inilabas ng National Union of Journalists of the Philippines o NUJP. Sinasabi ditong kailangang balanse ang mga report na ginagawa ng mga periodista. Paraan ito upang maiwasan ang pagiging makaisang panig ng reporting. Pero nagbabala rin ng NUJP sa tinatawag na false balance o yung pagprepresenta ng ibang opinion na parang sinibigat lang yon ng iba pang pananaw, kahit solido na ang facts.
Halimbawa na lang sa climate change, hindi na kailangan hingi ng opinion ng climate change denier dahil nagkakasundo na ang mga eksperto na totoo ito. Pagdating sa martial law ng diktador na si Ferdinand Marcos, hindi na dapat binibigyan ng espasyo ang mga todo deny sa human rights violations na malawakang nakawan sa gitna ng isang katutak na pruweba. Pero okay din i-fact check ang misinformation lalo na kung kumakalat.
Teka partner, parang bias ka ata.
Siguro nga. Pero masama ba maging bias sa katotohanan? Trabaho ng journalist magbalita ng totoo. Dahil sa kakulangan ng media literacy at efforts ng ilang institusyong manloko ng publiko, minsan napaparatang biased ang balita basta hindi gusto ng audience. Kahit totoo naman to.
Napakahalagang ibalita lagi ang katotohanan. Dahil sa pamamagitan nito, namumulat ang mga tao, lalo na ngayong paparating na eleksyon. Kaya naman nagkaisa ang mahigit 300 journalists para itulak ang isang makatotohanan at makabulhang coverage ng halalang 2022. Hinihimok nito ang lahat ng media practitioners na iligay sa sentro ng coverage ang mga botante, siyang tunay na pundasyon ng bawat eleksyon.
Ang nangyari diyan, ang naging mas importante, ang naging mas mahalaga, ang naging mas sentro, yung mga kandidato, yung mga prominente, yung mga nasa poder. Yung tao na dapat siya lamang ang may korona, siya lamang ang tawag nating may soberenya, may sovereignty, may kakayahan. Parang siya yung hari. Actually, okay? Nawala sa larawan ng eleksyon.
Sabi rin ng mga periodistang lumagda sa pledge na dapat mas mag-focus sa mga issue at plataforma, hindi lang sa mga personalidad pagdating sa pagbabalita.
Susuriin rin nila ang mga track record at kwalifikasyon ng mga kandidato at partidong tumatakbo at pananagutin sa kanilang mga pahayag at pangako.
Iko-cover ang mga institusyong may mandatong siguraduhing patas, maayos at kapanipaniwala ang eleksyon.
Magdadamayan kung sakaling may ibang journalist o news organization na maharas.
At higit sa lahat, dapat magkaroon sila ng accountability o pananagutan sa publiko.
Ito kasing pledge na ito, hindi naman ito pangako lang sa audience, pero pangako rin natin ito sa isa't isa na ganito natin i-cover itong election na to, ganito natin siya, ganito ang treatment natin sa kanya. habang tayong media ay nagbabantay sa mga kandidato, habang tayo ay nagiging watchdog, no? Tayo rin mismo, dahil meron tayong promise sa isa't isa, ay magbabantayan din tayo na parang, di ba usapan natin, hindi tayo magpapadala sa mga gimmick, or usapan natin, hindi tayo maglalabas ng mga storya na unverified naman. Pwede rin tayong i-call out ng audience dahil nangako tayo, nagsabi tayo sa kanila na ito yung gagawin natin. At pag hindi natin siya tuparin, pwede sila mawala ng tiwala sa atin. Pwede nila tayong pagalitan. At yun nga, yun ang challenge doon, na kailangan natin siyang sundin, kailangan natin tubdin dahil nga ang nakasalalay dito hindi lang yung elections, no, pero yung credibility din natin as media.
Malaki ang gagampan ng tungkulin ng media pagdating sa halalan, pero hindi naman kami ang tunay na bida rito.
Importante ang aming tungkulin. Pero higit sa lahat, importante ang tungkulin ng mga botanteng mag-isip, kumilatis, bago i-shade ang balota.
Sa panahon ngayon naglipa na ang fake news at sinusubukang dungisan ang imahe ng media, laging tatandaan, huwag kukurap.
Maraming salamat sa suporta ng Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism para sa video na ito.
Salamat rin sa panonood at kung may natutunan kayong bago ngayong araw, i-like at i-share ang video na ito.
Mag-subscribe na sa philso.com at i-follow ang aming mga social media accounts. Hanggang sa muli, paalam!
Maraming salamat dyan, Save and James. I'd like to call in Save. Save, salamat sa video. Napakaganda nung paumpisa natin. Maybe you'd like to speak a bit about what you produce.
Hi. Opo. Salamat po una-una po, salamat palagi sa PCIJ for tapping us, for thinking of us for this video, for this production, no. So ang prompt really is to explain yung wag kukurap pledge, pero we wanted to expand on that dun sa current I say parang battles that we face in the media, no. So laging may efforts to discredit us as an institution and as media practitioners. So we wanted to explore that, and we wanted to use that as a jump off point papunta dun sa pledge, which the core of the pledge is basically for us to be able to serve our audiences better, no, and to put them at the center of our coverage. So basically, ganon, it's just us trying to explain the role of the media in a witty and fun way, like the way that we always wanted to do Anyari episodes, no. Medyo satirical ng konti. But yeah, yun, that's what we wanted to do, and I hope that you enjoyed it.
Pinost niyo na ba to? O dito pa lang natin napanood yan?
Dito pa, this is a world first. Yeah.
Ayun. Kita niyo naman. Privilege tayo. No, but seriously, Save, and to James also, maraming salamat. Alam niyo, just a brief background. Para lang mailabas yung manifesto, yung statement ng wag kukurap na yan. Ako, ilang meetings na mga, sabihin na lang natin, mas nakatatandang mga journalist sa'yo. Ilang meetings siya, madugo na mga editing session. Yung iba dyan, iiling-iling, but you know who you are. But it took a long time. But then to see this in this format, na I really feel ito maraming makakagusto, and it really distills a lot of the things that we talked about into something really accessible, really fun, at the same time yung diwa ng gusto natin pahiwatig nandyan pa rin. Maraming salamat. Buti na lang maraming mga batang journalists who are stepping up and doing the storytelling in ways that frankly a lot of us don't know anymore, or can't do it as well as you. Maraming salamat, Save, and to James also, and everybody in the Anyari team.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sige, okay. So with that, we'll go into the session and we'll call in some of those oldies that I was referring to. Pasensya na. Damay naman ako sa inyo. Sama-sama tayo dyan. We'll go straight into a discussion. No? I want to invite Jing Reyes. Jing is Senior Vice President and Head of Integrated News and Current Affairs Division sa ABS-CBN. We're also joined by Mr. Francis Alan Angelo. Francis is editor-in-chief, or Angelo. Francis is editor-in-chief of the Daily Guardian in Iloilo. And Carol Arguillas. Caroline is editor-in-chief of Minda News, of course, based out of Davao. Maraming salamat. Jing, Francis, and Carol, first of all, di natin kaya yon, sa totoo lang.
Maraming salamat, Robbie. Nice to see everyone today. Oo, masyado talaga na tayong medyo veterano na, no? So, ang galing ng mga batang journalist, believe ako. They made it very,
relatable.
Edgy, di ba? Maganda. Congrats.
Storytelling is at the core. Other than journalism, storytelling, we keep hearing that a lot more. Diba, these days. Dati talagang journalism, and so on, kung ano-anong klaseng journalism. But we keep reminding ourselves that storytelling is so important right now, especially with all of these mediums and platforms that if you're anything like me, sobrang iba na that I don't even bother to try and open an account. Or I open an account and I keep deleting
TikTok,
it.
in other words.
Pero kasi totoo lang, yung TikTok, ilang beses na ako nag-open ng account. Really, because I see things, pag-uusapan, and then sabi ko, sige na nga, hindi naman ako magsasayaw, pero bubuksan ko yung TikTok if only so I can lurk and only so I could teach myself. Alam mo ba, I think this is an accurate say, I don't even know how to lurk on TikTok. But anyway, but let's get to the meat of what we want to discuss here, and maybe later on in the forum, we'd like to invite also the young people to jump in. Para sabihan din tayo na parang hindi lang tayo nandito para kunwari tayo magtuturo. We also want to learn from each other, especially from the young people, on how to do the storytelling really effectively. But I want to go straight to Wag Ko Corrupt, because all of us were one way or the other involved in this. We'd like to thank, of course, I remember Sheila Coronel, and then she reached out to Melinda, and they really put together, this and the whole idea was just to gaya ng sinabi kanina sa video nila, Save, let's put down some principles for ourselves. And the whole principle there also is not to say na lagot kayong mga politiko, ito ang gagawin namin. No. The objective there was to put our names there and to hold ourselves accountable, so that everybody else can say, di ba pumirma ka dito? Di ba sabi nyo gagawin nyo to? No? So that's part of the power of this whole initiative for Wag Ko Corrupt. So I wanted to ask you, we launched that I think a couple of months ago. Nabanggit kanina sa video, mga 300 na raw yung pumirma. Kanina sinabi sa akin nila Florin, 400 na raw yan ang mga pumirma dyan. So I wanted to ask with that basic question. Since we signed it, ito yung sinabi, di ba? We'll try not to be biased. These are my words. We will put voters at the center, not the candidates of our coverage. We'll focus on issues and platforms. We will track the records of everyone and we'll check everybody kung may sinabi sila. We will cover institutions, hindi lang mga kandidato, but we'll also cover the COMELEC. We will also cover the parties, the political parties, everybody who says they're involved in responsible elections. We'll cover NAMFREL, we'll cover PPCRV, everybody. We will protect each other. We will defend each other. And we will try to ensure our own credibility, and we'll also try to explore some collaboration. Diba? So, given all of that, you can pick and choose anywhere you want. But my first question is, so kamusta na tayo? So we've had about 2.5 months ever since we all signed on to that. In all honesty, how do you feel we've been doing so far? Mahaba pa naman, but at the same time, we should ask this as early as possible. Who wants to go first? Kahit sino.
I'll go first, Robbie. Of course, we've been trying to stay true to our pledge. And as you said, maaga pa. And there have been so many events. It was a pretty eventful period of filing and substitutions, remember. So I think we are guilty of really putting too much focus on the candidates and all that chaos about party divisions, who was substituting for whom, what's behind this, confusing statements, all that infighting within the administration party that led to neither one of them using or representing that party when they filed their respective COCs. So, as usual, media, journalists became so engrossed in covering the obvious, right? But I guess we are slowly beginning to put more focus on voters and issues now that that has stabilized in a way, right? We know who's running, with whom, and so they've started visiting provinces and talking to people in various areas around the country. So now I think is the time for us to really give more focus, more attention to the voters who are the audiences in those many so-called listening tours of the candidates.
Carol.
We started there.
Yeah.
Carol, you agree?
Yeah, initially ang napapansin ko is that the focus was more on the personalities again, rather than on the issues. But of course, that is to be expected nga because of the drama about these substitutions, diba, and the filing of COCs. Maraming kailangan pang gawin. For example, I think it is really important to review previous elections, revisit previous elections so that everyone has a clearer picture of what to expect and what the candidates now have been telling us in the last how many years, no? For example, I come from Mindanao. We are composed of 27 provinces and 33 cities. We are home to the incumbent president. We are home to 3 presidential candidates. That's Bongo, Manny Pacquiao, and Ernie Abella, the former spokesperson. We are also home to the vice presidential candidate, Sara Duterte, who is the mayor of Davao City. And we are home to several senatorial candidates. Zubiri, who is a re-electionist, Samira Gutok, and Manny Piñol, among others. No? Of course, we also realize that there are problems in terms of covering the elections in this pandemic, and the fact that so many journalists in Mindanao actually lost their jobs. Kasama yung mga reporters dati ng ABS-CBN, and those community papers that actually folded up or reduced the frequencies and nag-freeze hiring. So kumukonti talaga yung mga journalists, no, na nagtatrabaho. The others who lost their jobs have actually joined the campaign machineries also of candidates. So parang ang dami mong kailangang gawin talaga. I'll start with that. No? Maraming problemang dapat tugunan ng pansin. And also, I hope that media institutions, especially those in the national media, will attend to the concerns of their correspondents in Mindanao and in other parts of the country, no, outside Metro Manila. Thank you.
A lot to unpack there, but I want to get to Francis first. Francis, do you think we had a choice? Kasi di ba parang sa totoo lang naman dinalaro tayo ng mga kampanya Di ba? Dinrable tayo. I mean, to be honest about it, it really was almost so easy. In fact, we were predicting it. And we were saying it, para bang yung analysis ng marami is nandun lang sa level ng parang itong gagawin nila sa atin eh, di ba? I-dribble lang tayo sa naratibo, particularly around, well, in this particular case, gaya nga nabanggit ni Jing, di ba? Yung substitution, the deadlines, and so on. O sige, that's a big given. Parang ang hirap naman talaga iwasan. Pero ayun yung tanong ko, was there a way for us to naiwasan yun? Was there a way for us to have covered the event so far better?
Well, we can always focus kung bakit ganun ang naging dynamics, lalo na dun sa party system, the electoral system itself, how people actually, yung consumers natin, hindi lang tayo, how our consumers actually view these things. Para sa kanila siguro, it's just a big circus ng mga sikat na tao. And kahit pa na pasayaw-sayaw o nagjo-joke-joke sa mga statements nila, making a fool of themselves, yung ating kasing readers din naman or mga consumers, they seldom demand naman yung sana a higher level of the discussions from the candidates. At tayo naman, just like your TikTok dilemma, ako ay napilitan ding mag-open ng TikTok kasi nga, ano ba ito? Ba't ang dami ditong materials na nakikita? So, talagang sasabay ka sa sa agos eh. But I think kung hindi man makademand yung ating mga consumers ng mataas na level na discussion sa mga nangyayari, meaning i-discuss yung bakit papalit-palit ng partido or substitute, siguro may choice tayong to ask the appropriate persons or authorities or experts kung bakit ganun at explain in a manner na nadadigest o na iintindihan ng ating mga consumers o ng ating mga audience.
A question to all of you. We said, nandun pa rin tayo sa first principle na sinabi natin, paninindigan natin, we will put voters at the center, not the candidates. We haven't done really a sterling job on that so far. But tell me, I mean, looking back over the past 2 or 3 months, because we kept our focus on the candidates still, what would you say are some issues na ang laki-laki niyan pero pinalusot natin? Ang laki-laki niyan na voter-centric issue na natabunan precisely because we were still focused on candidates. Ano yung mga nakaraan na mga usapin sana or issues that we could have covered better or for which we could have asked the right questions?
Well, siguro mauna na ako sa Robby, no? Sa tulong na rin ng PCIJ sa fellowship is yung isang issue dun yung mga frontliners natin, sa medical frontliners natin in the middle of this pandemic. Parang ano lang sila, dati yung balita, yung discrimination sa kanila at the onset of the pandemic. Then later on, yung kanilang mga benefits, etc. etc. So, ganung focus, siguro kwento nila, naikikwento din natin. But what is government doing about it? Hindi lang sa ngayon, but in the long run, in future health crisis like this, legislative agenda nila. So, as much as possible, I think we should try asking those questions sa kanila na moving forward from here. The lessons we learn, anong gagawin natin? Hindi lang sa frontliners, but yung kabuuang picture ng ating public health system.
Yeah, and we should point out, di ba? I mean, all the surveys bear this out, di ba? I mean, it's not even as if we might lose readers or audience. All surveys bear out that highest on the priority of voters right now is how to emerge into a post-COVID world. They're concerned about their health. They're concerned about their jobs. Jing, do you agree that that notwithstanding us doing stories on these things, na our being candidate-centric so far has let some issues not only pass, but some issues that really could have actually consolidated our audiences as well and made us more relevant in their eyes.
Yes, definitely, Robbie. Kasi ang dami talagang nangyayari that are related to the COVID pandemic. And as of now, we are seeing still, a lot of dissatisfaction among frontliners, among medical practitioners, among communities that have yet to receive the vaccines. Actually, we are of course glad that Metro Manila is ano sabi nila, mga 88% na ba? 85% vaccinated na. Pero ang daming kulang pa no, sa mga probinsya namin. There's inequality in the distribution of these vaccines. And unfortunately, kulang, well, sa amin, medyo kinukulang kami dyan sa pagbabalita dahil na rin nga na kulang na ang aming regional presence. Even if we wanted to get more stories, and our correspondents do try to do that. But it's different kasi wala na kaming regional stations that there used to be those regional hubs, and whose primary obligation is really to gather news about and for their communities there in their respective areas. So diyan ako nanghihinayang talaga ngayon. Kulang ang atensyon sa regional areas, especially in terms of healthcare, in terms of vaccination, in terms of distribution. Alam mo, ang isang mahirap ding sitwasyon nila, hindi mo mako-compare because in Metro Manila, we have a lot of health practitioners who can do vaccinations, right? Sa probinsya, isang ospital sa isang lugar. Yung mga healthcare people doon nagtetend doon sa ospital, and when they go to the vaccination sites, then iiwan nila yung iba nilang duty, hindi ba? Carol, alam mo to. So that is also exacerbating their problem there in terms of access to communities, access for communities in terms of vaccines. Another issue, I think, is that hindi rin natin nabibigyan ng masyadong pansin ang mga desisyon, ang mga nilalabas ng COMELEC. Medyo we are really dependent on what they give reporters. And I think this has been a problem since the pandemic for journalists. It's been very difficult for us to get access to documents, to do more investigative work. Napansin ko yan kasi lahat halos ng press cons ngayon virtual. You can't even have access to, physical access to the person you want to talk to the news sources. Pahirapan na makakuha ng dokumento when you want to do research. These are challenges that have been there and we've been grappling with even before the election season began. And I can foresee that this will persist.
Yeah.
Sige, we'll get to some of those things that you mentioned kanina, especially in terms of covering COMELEC. But I want to get to Carol, and this will still involve you, Francis, no? Dito in national media, when we talk about something so basic that everybody looks at it, diba? The new COVID cases in the Philippines, diba? It's always one national number, diba? And we take that as, okay, bumababa na and so on. But everything shows na bumaba sa Metro Manila, sa NCR, pero tumataas elsewhere. Iba ba ang pag-cover ng COVID not only as a public health matter but also as an election matter? Iba ba ang pag-cover ng COVID and vaccines in Visayas, in Mindanao, relative to how you're seeing it being covered by the national media?
There is, I think, Robbie, a very big problem is public health education, especially since there are so many people who, in terms of vaccination hesitancy, malaking factor pa rin yun, malaking population pa rin ang ayaw talagang magpabakuna din. So parang may kulang talaga doon sa public health education, kung bakit hindi ayaw ng mga tao na magpabakuna. Yesterday, I took a cab and the driver actually has not been vaccinated pala kasi mag-farming na lang daw siya kaysa magpabakuna. No? Bakit hindi na-explain ng maigi sa kanila na kailangan yung bakuna? But we are lucky in Davao City actually because we get like Metro Manila, in terms of vaccination, malaking porsyento na ang nababakunahan in the Davao region. But in the other parts of Mindanao, kulang pa rin. Lanao del Sur, for instance, kulang siya, and partly it's not because kulang yung bakuna, but it's really also because of hesitancy on the part of the residents, no? So yun yung malaking problema na dapat matuunan sana ng pansin, na hindi rin nabibigyan ng much attention, no? Kasi nagkaka-problema na sa nafo-focus yung attention sa election, whether at the national or the local level. But some people in the market, for example, here in Davao City, ang sinasabi nila is election lang pala ang solusyon sa COVID. By that they mean nagsidating yung mga bakuna daw kasi election time na. So may mga ganun din na pag-iisip, no? But in the other parts, as I said, kulang na kulang pa rin yung bakuna.
Okay. Francis?
Yeah. Well, on the parts sa Iloilo, parang, well, may mga commentaries and some insinuations that yung bakuna nga, tsaka yung management ng pandemic, kinoconnect doon sa politika ng ilang kandidato. For example, the fact that the city actually decided to vaccinate yung mga non-residents pero nagtatrabaho dito kahit sa araw lang, parang nalalagyan ng kulay ng politika dahil daw may party list daw si ganito ganyan. So kaya ginagamit yung bakuna to get voters outside of his jurisdiction ng LGU niya. So hindi lang sa city but sa province na rin. But on the other hand, yung sabi nga ni Ma'am Carol na yung kaalaman ng tao about sa bakuna fuzzy din malabo din kasi may nakakausap ako, although usap sa kwentong kali lang na ayaw nilang ganitong brand kasi nga mahina daw, mababa ang efficacy, mas maganda daw yung foreign sound or yung western sounding ng mga brands kasi nga mas effective, when in fact science would actually say otherwise. So dun din yung challenge natin dun sa in explaining to the people na well, certain vaccines work in a different way and may have certain effects to a certain group of people. So ganun, at saka yung mga lockdowns dati, yung mga MACQ, etc., parang yung mga pronouncement ng aming mga local officials dito ay parang nahulog na rin sa politika. Sinasabi, parang restrict kami kasi nga ganito, parang hindi kami identified sa ganitong political figure. Then, pero minsan, humihingi rin ng tulong yung mga local government officials namin dun sa mga taong malalapit din sa, malalapit sa administrasyon just to get enough supply of vaccines and help in managing the pandemic.
Okay. Now in all of this, ibabalik ko lang, I'll just remind everyone, ang objective natin dito sa panel na to.
Recording in progress.
Is we really want to keep talking about, how do we improve our coverage and how do we amplify our own message and live our own message to try to put the voter at the center of all our coverage to really make it about them rather than the candidates. Pero pwede ba, Jing, Carol, Francis, if you don't mind, exercise. Historicon tayo. Just para lang meron tayong real-world example of the dilemmas that come up pagka may issue. Nasa totoo lang, alam natin, we're being led by the nose to particular stories. And then how do we resist going for the low-hanging fruit or even the sensational fruit? And then say, no, we will stick to our agenda. How is this voter-centric? So let's start. President Duterte says may nagkokokin, unnamed candidate. How do we resist that? And how do we resist not basically, going so close to the line? Wink, wink, we're in on the joke. Alam namin kung sino yan, di ba? But alam natin as editors, nagagamit tayo, no? It is not us dictating the agenda here. In fact, we don't even know gaano katagal pa kaya to. And plus, President Duterte will have that platform all the way to May 2020. Di ba? He will keep he will have the opportunity to keep throwing innuendo against anyone until May 2022. Tuwing mangyayari yun, ganun na lang ba? Parang we just keep, following his every word and then speculating and passing off our speculations and our wink-wink, we're in on the joke as our analysis. But if you take that example, diba? Never mind how we've covered, how should we cover something like that?
In a perfect world, we should not even have covered it, right? Unang-una, innuendo, unnamed, no proof, no nothing. Pero yun na nga, we live in a very imperfect world. Sa story conference namin, ang usapan dyan ay, nagkaroon nga kami ng debate dyan paano gagamitin, paano iiwasan ba? Di ba natin gagamitin? Are we gonna totally ignore it? Syempre, ang consensus, hindi natin pwedeng ignore kasi tayo lang ang mag-i-ignore. Yun din yun di ba? If we don't carry it, then why are we not carrying it and the others are? That was one consideration. And so we had to decide and we had to agree that we would ask all the candidates to react to that, allegation by the president. And I think that's what the others did as well. Pero talagang, you're right. Sabi ko nga, in an ideal world and hindi natin to dapat bigyan ng space
Yeah, I'm reminded of something that Ed Lingao said. Ewan ko nandito si Ed. I know Ed took part in the conference. But Ed was asked before, why would you guess people na alam mo namang may agenda? Why would you guess people on the chiefs or in your public affairs programs, alam mo naman na, parang magre-red tag lang yan or meron lang yung agenda? And Ed said something like, and I completely agree, he said, because if we don't guess them, they win by default.
Yeah.
If we also just leave it there, unquestioned, then we abdicate our opportunity to ask them about it. But I guess that's the question, Carol and Francis. How do you jujitsu something like this, in particular against President Duterte, diba? Or any politician for that matter? How do you jujitsu that and say na akala mo ikaw magdidikta nito? Hindi. We will use our journalism, turn this around into something responsible and turn this around into something that is voter-centric. How do we do that?
We didn't use that story, Robbie. Kasi as Ginga said, puro naman siya innuendo kasi din. The other way to do it is actually to focus on the other aspects of the drug war that he launched. And he launched it not only in Davao, in Metro Manila, but also in the rest of the country. But it started here in Davao. Diba? So babalik ka dun sa ano bang history nito.
Yeah.
It will always be good to go back to where it all started.
But I think, therefore, the dilemma is it then becomes not so much do we cover it or not. Ewan ko, I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong. Pero ako rin. Kasi hindi, also, we can't pretend that we're in a vacuum. The reality is sa social media, nag-viral na. Di ba? The reality is yun ang pinag-uusapan ng mga tao. We also have a responsibility, I think, to try to add something of value to what people in social media are talking about. So, Francis, then the question still becomes, how to not cover at the same time. How do you cover something like that? How do you lead your reporters to, no, ito yung angulo na binuksan niya for us?
Actually, may isang candidate na nag-raise ng issue na dapat niyang pangalanan at hulihin because after all, that was his campaign that, he launched his war on drugs in the first day of his administration. I think it was Calyodi who called him out on that. At yun, ginamit natin yan kasi sa totoo lang, you can't really ignore the fact that if he had proof, why didn't he tell the police or why didn't he, really go after this candidate?
Tsaka in fairness, di ba? I mean, I'm not saying na walang ginawa yung media. In fairness, we've seen stories asking about the double standards. We've seen public affairs hosts confronting spokespersons for the president and asking the candidates, bakit ganyan? Pagka yung presidente hindi kailangan magbigay ng ebidensya. Pagka mga kandidato, pagka mayayaman, parang magagawa natin sa yate ginawa, sa eroplano ginawa. Wala tayong magagawa. It's on. But Francis, beyond that, and actually seriously beyond this issue of okay, I think a bigger issue here and a bigger reality is that, like I said, hanggang May, he has that platform. Diba? He can throw any innuendo out there and that becomes headline material and it becomes the #1 agenda to be talked about in the editorial newsroom. And we're back right there at this dilemma. And then you can apply that to any other candidate and it really incentivizes mudslinging, diba, on everybody's part. So the question is, how do we, what will you tell a young reporter na this is how you keep your focus?
Well, balik natin, makailang beses na bang natisod yung presidente, lalo na sa narco-list niya. At saka sa narco-list niya, sino ba talagang tinatarget? Minsan, identified sa dating administrasyon, o yung mga kalaban sa politika. So, parang ganun pang contextualization nun. Pero sa iba sasabihin nila, politics is the refuge of sinners daw sasabihin politically motivated, parang ganun. But totoo naman may pattern naman So I think we should examine yung pattern ng presidente sa mga pronouncement niya. And baka ilang beses na rin ba siyang natisod na nag-retract siya kasi nga walang ebidensya o mali ang pangalan, hindi na vet maayos. So it goes right into the gut issue of gaano ba talaga ka refined o magaling churn out ng intelligence reports or ng intelligence information yung ating presidente, which becomes the basis of his pronouncement. So,
Robbie, ideally, President Duterte should really be asked. That's the most ideal nga sana. If a reporter can ask him directly kung ano tong pinagsasabi niya, Kaso I think he's the only president na hindi naman nagpa-press con or very limited yung engagement niya with the media, since 2016, di ba? And very limited din yung one-on-one interviews.
Yes.
I think he did that only on his first year. 2016, I don't know if 2017 he did that, but very limited yung engagement niya with the media. So, and then while there are efforts to sana get in touch with him, grabe yung kanyang cordon sanitaire naman. So, ang makakalusot lang doon yung mga kaibigan, di ba? Kaibigan nila. So,
I want to be clear. I want to be clear. I hope everybody understands that this question is not really about President Duterte per se. It's the most obvious example. It's the most glaring example, especially, and it's the freshest example. But at the end of it, it really is about the fact that we expect the mudslinging, and we know that if people like President Duterte can get a reaction from us and then get a reaction from their fellow candidates. Same way, it incentivizes everybody, including the candidates, to just keep engaging in mudslinging. And we're all still here in this old spiral and very familiar situation. Speaking of which, kanina Carol sabi mo, we know what to expect, di ba? Alam na natin, di ba? We know what to expect because we've seen this in past elections. Pero Carol, yung iba sa amin first-time voter, di ba? So refresh our memory. What are some basic things na tandaan natin in all past elections, ganito ang news cycle, and ito ang mga now we have a chance to avoid that?
I think babalik tayo dun sa the focus on the candidates lang, ano? Kasi parating ganun yung coverage, no? Na we focus only on the personalities, and we do not even, I mean, quite a number do not even give a context to what this candidates represent, no? Hindi din binabanggit yung member ba ito ng mga dynasties? Kasi importante 'yon. Importante na malaman ng botante na in the last 3, 4 decades, 5 decades, ito lang yung ruling family in their respective areas. Meron kaming in Mindanao, at least we have a listing of the dynasties of who were elected from post-EDSA, no? And para sa akin, importante yon, so that you don't even have to comment on it eh. Ipaskel mo lang, ilagay mo dun sa isang prominent na place, and then people will see immediately na they've been actually electing the same people since the 1980s, the 1970s, even the 1960s. Importante na mabigyan ng mabuksan yung isipan ng mga tao na ganito na lang ba tayo parate? Wala ba tayong ibang choices? Maganda ding tingnan, and we're trying to do that also in Mindanao, to look at the other candidates, no, who are not your usual candidate. Hindi kasama hindi parte ng dynastiya, hindi members ng traditional politicians, etc. If at all they can present a better choice for the voters, kung maganda ba yung kanilang programa, kasi parang quite a number of journalists have also, I think, become complacent, in the sense that if you're in a particular area and this area is ruled by a dynasty, parang hindi na sinisingil, no? Kung ano bang nagawa ng ruling family na ito. Marami yan in various parts of Mindanao, no? As I said, 27 provinces and 33 cities kami. Iilan lang talaga dyan ang makikita mo na it's the same family name, no? Pabalik-balik lang yung family name. So importante yon na matulungan yung botante to decide. We only have 163 days, by the way, to May 9, no? Konting-konting panahon na lang.
Oo, ayun, totoo naman talaga dyan eh, di ba? Yung the things that we committed to in Wag Kukurap, one real lesson is that we have to keep doing this even beyond elections. Di ba? Because if even for record keeping, and if even also to build that culture for keeping people in check. Speaking of which, kanina nga sinabi ni Carol, di ba? Babalik at babalik din tayo. Unfortunately, we keep coming back to the candidates. We keep coming back to their personality. But one way to deepen it, and we did mention it in the Wag Kukurap manifesto, is to focus on backgrounds, track records, di ba? And the history of these candidates. So you're focusing on the candidates, but by focusing on their background, their history, and so on, maybe that's one way to deal with it. Jing, I'll bring in an example. Support for the death penalty. Parang napakadali lang for these candidates to say, nagbago isip ko. Ano na rin ako, naniniwala na rin ako, anti-puryang death penalty na yan. Di ba? And it's a story for a day. We throw in a lesson, we throw in a line that this candidate, used to support, and now hindi niya na sinusuportahan. But obviously that doesn't tell the story, di ba? Of how vociferous and of how rabidly pro-capital punishment some people were all these decades, in fact, di ba? So talk about that, Jing. Parang how much better can we be putting focus not just on the positions, but on the history of the positions and the stances that these candidates have taken?
Sa akin, ang the best way to established track record and performance would really be to ask them at length as to how and why they changed their position, because then mahuhuli mo sa sagot naman if they're just playing to the gallery and if they're just using it because they're campaigning. Hindi ba? Kasi if you just say, ngayon sa ano na lang ako, doon lang sa heinous crimes or drug crimes lang. Doon na lang ngayon, pero dati 'di ba? Death penalty per se talaga siya. We really have to probe into the whole evolution of his position. And unfortunately, kulang ang newscast para sa ganyang klaseng treatment, right? We really have to have more public affairs programs or lengthy one-on-one interview with candidates so as to really dig deep into their positions, their convictions, their beliefs, their values. Kasi ang hirap yun pa rin minsan we want to go for what's popular. Diba? We want to go for what's gonna click with the audience. And so it's so tempting to ask about fun questions, medyo mababa o light moment muna tayo. Yeah. But I think we should really devote more time to substantive issues and issues that have to do with performance, their stand on certain advocacies, bakit ganon sila. And ako rin, Robbie, ang tingin ko rin, one way we can put voters at the center of our coverage would be in debates. Before, we were so fond of pitting the candidates against each other, right? Pinagsasabong natin But really, it would be best to use a format in which people, ordinary folks, can ask the questions of candidates, and never mind that they don't fight on air, never mind that they don't blast each other or attack each other on our airwaves. What's important is they answer the question of an ordinary person, ang mangingisda, magsasaka, tindera, hindi ba? Hindi ba yun naman ang mahalaga, yun ang dapat nilang ligawan ng mga boto. So I think we can do better in that aspect.
I want to go back to something that you said, no? Na bakit nga ba, 'di ba? Parang ito kung magpalit sila ng position sa death penalty, parang nagpapalit lang ng kamiseta, 'di ba? And then you can take parang ganun lang kadali 'yon, 'di ba? Ganun lang kadali. But to your point na bakit nga ba? Yeah. And I think if, for example, if it was my newsroom, I'll ask, bakit nga ba? My suspicion is that the surveys now bear it out, that the voters are against death penalty. And that probably ties in with all the surveys showing that that people have finally grown uneasy about the war on drugs, about the past 6 years, it's anti-poor, and mahirap lang na namamatay and so on. But if you were to do a story on, here is the survey which explains bakit nagbabaliktaran lahat ng mga kandidato sa whether it's war on drugs or
endo
or the death penalty or endo. If I were to get a copy of that, diba? Or if I were to ask around the social scientists what spurred this, because it must have been the voters. It must have been the voters and sentiments coming through in some study or review or survey or FGD or whatever. And then you're still talking about capital punishment. You're still talking about the candidates. You have the element of personalities there. But now it becomes voter-centric. Diba? What do you think, Francis?
I think that would be an interesting take na rin siguro. Aside from the results, maybe we can ask yung people on the ground, yung mga voters na mismo, kung bakit, ano bang tingin nila ngayon, 6 years after nitong administration na to. Their impression of the drug war, is it really effective? Wala naman talagang shabu. Well, almost every day may drug bust Kahit dito sa amin, araw-araw yan. So parang, teka, parang ganun pa din Nothing changed 6 years before, until now. So siguro it's worth, if we really want to focus dun sa voters, we should really carry stories na ano bang frustration nyo sa gobyerno, and then what are you expecting from the next presidency? Maybe not just the next 6 years, maybe in the next 20 years as well.
No, and that's different, Francis, from just waiting for the next surveys to come out. Diba?
Yes, contextualizing yung survey.
I see Shally has a reminder for everyone. If you have questions, we're entering an open forum. We will try to bring in your please type in your comments if you're here in the Zoom room with us, you can type in your questions. If you're following via Facebook, you can put your questions as comments. We'll try to get to those. Meron din pong nagmamatsak dyan. So please do that. But to get us into the open
Robbie.
forum.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Carol.
May I say something? Yeah. I really want to put emphasis on research. Well, some newsrooms, of course, the bigger ones have a research department, no? Kami, wala naman kaming research department na tinatawag, but if the journalist is very masigasig, no? Research is very important because it will really provide you the context and the background, no? On, for example, the stand of this particular candidate, no? For example, how many of us actually kept a copy of, because I did, I hope others did also, of who voted for and against ABS-CBN during that.
Ijing, my copy.
I'm sure. How many voted for and against the Anti-Terror Act? So importanteng alam natin kung ano yung boto nila during this during this particular issues, kasi importante 'yon. And that will also show us what they give us a preview of what their stand will be in the next
Oo. Alam niyo, one of the key things also dito na gusto natin pag-usapan, collaboration. Diba? Where can we cooperate? And initially, when we say collaboration, it's on the level of, baka meron tayong storya na pwede natin pagtulungan. Diba? Cover mo dyan, interview mo siya, and so on, and then we'll put together. But it can probably, I'm just thinking, Carol, maybe on the level of just research, data. Kung meron diyang mga nasa congressional beat at saka sa Senate beat, di ba? There's no reason why you can't open an online Google document, di ba? And then all of you just put in, ito, anti-terror law, ito, yung mga binanggit ni Carol na mga issues sa ABS-CBN. And then we just tabulate. How did people vote? Di ba? It can be a collective effort on the part of the, when we say collaboration, it's not just news organization to news organization. Kayong mga barkada dyan sa these are things that maybe you can all get together on. But let me get baka naman merong mga ganyan. Baka naman merong mga collaborative research I want to bring in Carmela, no? Carmela Fonbuena of PCIJ, and also our Carmela muna, meron na ba? I mean, before we continue down this path, baka naman merong mga resources na nagtutulong-tulong ng mga journalists.
Merong grupo, no, yung Freedom for Media, Freedom for All, ang organization na kasama ang Minda News, kasama ang PI, NUJP, CMFR, PCIJ. So regular ang meetings natin, especially because heightened ang attacks against the media. And siguro napapansin nyo, di ba, madalas kami magpadala ng mga statements sa inyo. Para I think it's a strong message na united tayo when we issue statements about issues affecting us. But not just us, the civil society and the academe that we work with, no? But it's beyond that. It's not just about issuing statements. Ang importante na tulungan din natin, especially COVID times, isa ito sa mga topics that Ariel of PPI is always raising. May mga nagsara ng mga dyaryo dahil sa pandemya. So we need to help. We need to help community journalists also. There's an entire session, even at the opening plenary, we highlighted the need to help community journalists. Kasi sila yung nasa front lines, di ba? And there's a lot of comments here posted. Ang ganda ng discussion sa comment section din eh. Based on what you're talking about, ang gaganda ng mga inputs here. We will take time to read them about coverage of COVID-19 distribution of supplies. Ang daming storya on the ground na if we're able to help our fellow journalists in the community bring out these stories kasi minsan they don't have access to resources to, work on their stories. Other than that, PCIJ, promote na rin ako ng collaboration. That's really, and even in this training, we have fellows and we'll be selecting a few of the fellows who will work with PCIJ next year to work on investigative stories. So there are efforts to help each other. But I think we need more. There's really a lot to do. Dahil pang mga bills, for example, di ba, yung media welfare bill, that will affect everyone. Remember, they're trying to dictate on us how much journalists should receive. Na parang ano ba ang category mo as a journalist and you're supposed to receive. I think maybe some will argue they have good intentions behind this bill, no, because it's about the welfare of journalists, but they don't understand how it works. So these are issues that we will continue to fight for ourselves, for our fellow journalists. There's really a lot of opportunity to cooperate, and that's really the theme of this conference, diba? Collaboration among ourselves, with the communities we work with, the civil society, and the academe. So I hope inspired tayo.
Thank you. Thank you, Carmela. Ipasok din natin si Juliet Labo Gavellana. She's Associate Publisher of the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Juliet, are you here? Yet? No, wala pa yata si Juliet. But let's read lang yung ibang yung ibang mga comments na banggit ni Carmela. Sabi ni Darwin Andres, nakakalungkot lang kasi maraming voters ang nabubulag sa malalaking pangako ng politicians kumpara sa paniwalaan ang feasible, doable plans and platforms. Ito sabi rin ni Ray Gaspay, bakit hindi tayo maging proactive? Can't media lobby and pressure Congress to pass the anti-dynasty law? Itong dynasty, kaya nang nabanggit kanina, no? Ito kasi talaga malaking problema. Not only that, it's their constitutional mandate to pass an anti-dynasty law. It says right there in the Constitution that Congress has to pass such a law. They have not. But that brings us again to the question of collaboration, di ba? When we talk about collaboration, Carol, we usually ang iniisip ng mga tao, parang like-sized organization to like-sized organization and so on. But really, there's a lot to explore. I think Carmela touched on this as well. Collaborating between national organizations and community media in particular. Talk about the access to information. Because pinag-usapan natin, di ba? Access to research teams ng malalaki, di ba? Advantage nila yon. But talk about, and let's incentivize this, the access to information and personalities that community media have, that even national media with all their correspondents don't necessarily have.
I think on our part, in Mindanos, I think we've, the fact that we have a listing of the dynasties from A to Z, that's Agusan del Norte to Zamboanga, Sibugay, is very important because it's easier for the journalists even in Metro Manila to look into that list. It's made available naman, and then if you talk in terms of thin and fat dynasties, makikita din doon sa matrix na yon. Sino yung thin at saka sino yung fat na dynasties. Of course, maraming fat dynasties. No? So, marami ding, kasi kami in Mindanos, we do the Mindanao picture, di ba? So, importante yon kasi 6 regions yung Mindanao. Even in COVID, we do that also. So, parang na siya, consolidated na yung Mindanao na data. So it's easier for whoever wants to research on it. So yun yung parang tulong namin dun sa ano. Sana nga lang din na ito kasi it has happened several times, no? Parang pinagtiyagaan yung gawin, tapos somebody will write about it without even crediting saan galing, di ba? Parang napaka-unfair naman nun dahil ilang araw din yun, ilang buwan din yung pinagtiyagaan na pag-aralan, no? At saka ilista. So yun.
At saka hindi ganun kahirap 'yon, 'di ba? To reach out to the writer and to the media company, 'di ba? We're talking precisely about collaboration at hindi
I have a collaboration with pwede na ba 'yon? Not yet. Sorry.
Pa tayo, Caroline.
Hindi pa siguro.
Sige. Sa'yo muna, Francis. I mean, how would you see the collaboration and how would you remind it's not just that it's obvious to smaller organizations that there's value to being able to collaborate with a bigger organization. But how would you remind the value there going the other way? How would you remind the big organizations, hey, don't forget the community media, the community journalists. What would you pitch to them to remind them that this is the real value? These people have access to these things na kahit gaano kalaki ka, you don't have.
Siguro, there's always that talk of compensation, lalo na sa mga correspondents. No? Just like us, we also suffer from manpower loss regularly, yung turnaround ng mga tao namin. You hire them, then they get poached by government or private businesses. Pag medyo magaling na sila, may mga connection na sila, so nakukuha sila. So, yung ganun mga issue. On the part of ABS-CBN, we actually partnered with them to help them in their regional coverage, at least in Iloilo. And part of the incentive of the partnership is not just a platform in ABS or the exposure, but the training as well that we're getting from them, especially on mobile journalism with Mojo. Two of our personnel or reporters were able to undergo training with them, how they do things. And at the same time, I believe that their partnership, regional partnerships, is an indication of the recognition the local press, community press, have deeper access to news sources that they would really, who are vital sa election coverage natin.
That's true, Francis, and thank you.
But going the other way, Jing, di ba? Parang not to belittle that aspect, di ba? Paano naman yung maliliit? I mean, for example, you have the resources. I mean, notwithstanding what you just went through, of course. Alam ko na tinamaan din kayo doon. But in terms of archives, in terms of even research units, talaga bang ano lang yan? Closed na lang yan? Or are there openings as well? I mean, we will respect that, of course. But what are some options for collaboration, particularly in terms of resource na maybe people assume na wala yan, di natin pwedeng lapitan yan, or that you would say na actually bukas naman kami sa mga ganito eh?
Oo. In fact, we were the ones who reached out to the local news outfits, Kami ang nakiusap sa kanila. We're humble enough to accept that our resources are limited now and our reach has really been diminished. And even when we were, mahirap na lang sabihin, kahit naman noong malakas pa ang ABS-CBN, I have always valued or recognized the value of community journalists. Like sila talaga ang immersed sa local politics, sa local governments dyan. At naniniwala ako sa collaboration, sa pagsasama-sama, especially in this very crucial time in our nation's history, Robbie. Bukod sa COVID threat, and there's a new variant that was detected, di ba? Another variant of concern. So that's already posing a threat to our journalists. So lalo pa tayong magkakaproblema in sending our people to far-flung places. So that's where a partnership is really important. And then the audience is also distracted and fragmented. They have so many other concerns. talagang hirap tayo to reach them and talk to them about what's at stake in this election. So that is, I think, a very important role that the community journalists can play na makakatulong sa amin sa national, and conversely, we will give them access to our stories. Yun yung content partnership namin. That's the exchange. No, we will also they can access our stories. We will credit their reporters, by the way, and use their bylines, use their names in the outros in case they report on radio or TV. And there will be other areas for collaboration. Francis mentioned the training. Yes, we did a whole week of training for them on photojournalism, on mobile journalism, on interviewing and all of that. So natutuwa nga ako eh. It's a very good start for us, and I think that partnership can even continue beyond elections. Di ba, Carol?
Yep.
Ito si comment from Nathaniel Mexican. Is that right? Nathaniel Mexican. Sabi niya, regarding ordinary people asking questions to politicians, the BBC has a weekly program called Question Time, where they stage at a different location every week, and where they invite politicians. During the show, they then only field questions from a live audience. Baka naman pwedeng i-adapt yan dito. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Di ba? Or ginagawa na ba yan?
Minsan kami ni Lucci, in fact, where we were in a study tour at that time, and we were brought to Manchester, in fact, to witness, to be a part of the observer group for Question Time. Maganda.
So paano ginagawa? Dinadala yung politiko, dadali mo sa isang kanto, ganon?
Sa isang lugar, they go around the UK, and then they have an audience there, and pagdating nung talk show host and the guests, they really get the questions from the members of the audience, and these are ordinary folks talaga, and they're unprompted, ha. Yung hindi siya scripted. Magandang idea yan. Thank you for reminding me about that. We want to do that. I hope you can also be our partners. We want to do that for our presidential and vice presidential forums. Even editorial, kung kaya.
Tsaka just to remind, this is not a suggestion just for a broadcast network. Everybody, talking about storytelling by the young people. Kayong mga mas marurunong mag-TikTok sa amin, kayong mas marurunong mag-Facebook Live, kayong mas magagaling sa social media. I can imagine this being implemented by even by individual journalists. A fantastic suggestion and reminder. Meron pa akong isa lang gusto rin i-instigate sa inyong lahat, no? And maybe Carmela, you can weigh in on this also. I think part of our job here is not just to deepen, but also to show people, kasi doon sa idea na yun, parang maganda di ba? Makikita mo magtatanong yung mga tao, makikita mo kailangan sumagot, pagkatapos wala namang mamamatay pagkatapos sumagot, di ba? So, but I think there's part of the environment where we're in is we're not only trying to find our space and our voice and get a word in edgewise, we're also trying to really push back against a lot of toxicity and a lot of bad habits, not just amongst ourselves, but against on everyone. Para bang walang marunong mag-usap na ngayon. Di ba? Parang, what can we also do to, beyond the content of our coverage, to also demonstrate to people that this is how a civilized democracy can handle topics, or are we actually part of the problem in instigating still the old sabong formats?
I think I want to go back to the question hour, which is a great idea. We can ask the candidates questions that the voters are interested in. Ang concern ko lang in this generation, in their social media campaigning, where they prefer canned materials on social media, will they be willing to subject themselves to be questioned like that? And if, because they can, bypass the media, and they can go straight to the voters. Kailangan natin ng strong push sa candidates that they should be willing to be questioned talaga. Hindi pwedeng parang si President Duterte na he will just hold a press conference whenever he likes it. And that will be the challenge for us because they will really attempt to bypass us so they can control their messaging, di ba? And it's social media campaigning. So it's not just, because if we go contrary to their messaging, their followers will attack us. I think, yes, we have a responsibility to focus on issues, but we really need to demand the candidates also to be responsible. So I think it's important for the candidates to send that message to their followers, and we should demand the candidates to send that message to the followers that they shouldn't allow certain kinds of language, hate speech, na dapat nangunguna sila. In fact, they should be made to say that their supporters shouldn't be, using this kind of language, hate speech. Dapat frontliner sila. Yes, it's our responsibility not to amplify hate speech, diba? But there's a big responsibility on the part of the candidates too. To send that message to their followers. Kasi otherwise, if they're not willing to do that, ibig sabihin, because that's the tactic they're employing to control their messaging.
Yeah, I also recall the recent call for yung i-boycott mo yung certain businesses supporting a candidate or napagkamalan lang nagsusuporta kasi doon nagbi-meeting yung core group ng kandidato. So we also called it out na hindi naman siguro dapat ganyan. If you're the candidate is espousing high-level campaign, discussion at good governance, siguro it behooves the supporters to toe the line and also yung leader nila to call them out na wag naman ganun na sabong-sabong na lang tayo, hindi na tayo nag-uusap about issues and platforms.
That's Robbie, may I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a real problem, no? They have discovered that they can just, do Facebook Live or give handout videos to journalists. Bypassing us is correct. That's being practiced as we speak, no? And that's really a challenge for our reporters in the field. Even those who are embedded in the campaigns, they're not guaranteed access. They have a hard time running after candidates and getting them to talk to them even or kasi importante yan sa atin, di ba? When we cover people, when we cover officials or ordinary folks, you want to talk to them kasi doon mo makikita yung authenticity ng tao, kung ano talaga yung nasa loob niya, pero mahirap ngayon yan, and that's a real challenge. And then of course, the other thing is that aside from the handout video and the Facebook Live and their own social media, they also can choose their own influencers to share or to do interviews with them and then just share this. And that's the quickest way to spread their own messaging. Yun yung mga challenges natin. There was a marketing expert that I listened to one time during a forum, and he said the first question asked of them, of advertisers, of PR and marketing groups, when political camps contact them for selling their candidate or working with them, is do you have a troll farm? So, yun na yung maano na paraan ngayon, very potent, no? Tool for
kasi parang the name of the game now for a candidate is just amplification, di ba?
Yes.
Parang, di ba, I'll only engage with a platform or an entity that can amplify what I'm saying. So I make my own material, I make my own content, and then whether it's a troll farm or in this case maybe media, di ba? Pero yung tanong ko, Carol, parang have we lost that much na parang we are now just seen as a potential, amplification platform, and then kung hindi ka lang din makakapag-amplify, there's nothing to compel me to engage with you.
I think the stories will bear us out. Kung maganda yung like for example, no, I'm referring to our case, no. pag may stories kami na iba from all the rest, mas maraming nagbabasa nun. Kasi iba yung approach niya eh. For example, yung on this challenger for the mayoralty of Davao City, of course, Mayor Sara Duterte changed her mind, no, and went for a national post. But when this Rui Lopez filed a COC for mayor, wala man masyadong kwento about who he is, no? So and then you realize na ang ganda ng background kasi even the father pala was actually helped Rodrigo Duterte become mayor and actually helped Attorney Rodrigo Duterte become a prosecutor. So maganda yung may background ka na ganyan. At matagal na rin kasing walang nagcha-challenge nung position for mayor in Davao City. So
but Carol, I think that also speaks at the same time to something that we discussed kanina. There's value to regional and even community. This is really something that honestly, parang I will be waiting for Mindanews to say something about this. That's it. But yung sa point na, can you give an example of where not necessarily thinking as a regional paper, just as a news organization, na everybody went this way, we covered it another way, and that really paid off for us in terms of audience. Not just to Carol, but anybody else. I mean, is there everybody else, or maybe even to PCIJ? Can you cite an example of where the knee-jerk response and the low-hanging fruit was where everybody went, and then the small investment of time to just think of something else, of something more important, actually paid off and really proved our point?
Mauna ako, sir, no? Siguro, one good thing yung fellowship ng PCIJ with our reporters and your fellow journalists din namin, discussing local issues. For one, yung sa health workers, di namin alam na ganun pa yung problema ng mga health workers. Some of them are contractuals. And most of them, actually, lahat sila contractuals. And they're at the mercy of what, kung anong nangyayari, kung may pondo man o wala, o kung ano man ang decision ng local government sa kanila. Then of course, on environment, Iloilo River is reputed to be, maganda tingnan, malinis. Pero in fact, there are a lot of other attendant issues that need to be addressed to really say na we've solved this environmental problem thing. Which only goes to show kung how deep are our understanding and kung gaano kalalim yung efforts natin to really preserve the environment. So those are the things na siguro somehow may mga reactions kami sa some of the readers who appreciated the effort. It's a long read, long form, but they somehow understand na these things need to be focused on, at least para hindi lang daily grind news, kundi something na talagang you will sit down and you will analyze the issue through long form reports and in-depth reporting.
To that point, Carmela, how do you communicate? How should people, what are the metrics for impact that makes it worthwhile? Diba? Kasi sa totoo lang, diba? We always say, kaya hindi nag-IJ, una, it does take some resources, a little bit more. You can do IJ even without that many resources. Pero at the same time, that's really part of the management process, diba? Na parang daming resources yan. And then, we're all using the same, the mga gas na metrics, diba? CPM, page views, hits, engagements, minutes per visit, and so on. Pero sa inyo, alam ko naman na PCIJ, you can't play that game, diba? But what are the metrics for you that you would remind other people that it might not redound to page views and hits, but this is a metric, an objective metric of engagement and impact, that do not overlook this because this is important for you as well.
Si Francis talked about our training on freedom of information, and then the Daily Guardian had one story where we're coming out with another one. At ang galing, ako advocate talaga. Ako naman galing ako sa beat eh. So I feel the journalist on the ground will know more about the issues that we cover. What PCIJ offers is the patience because they have the knowledge about the situation on the ground, the nuances. You know, for example, Francis keeps talking about yung situation of health workers in Iloilo. So they presented through FOI request gano kababa compared to the regular workers. They have the same job descriptions. And 5 years na contractual pa rin. These are issues we've been talking about kahit nga sa Senate hearing. These are being discussed, no? But what makes the story really good is talagang tinignan niya how it happens from the perspective of one health worker that we cannot name because he or she might lose his or her job. It's really explaining what rules, what EOs or resolutions ang ginagamit para dito that aids in the abuse of the contractual health workers, no? And PCIJ's contribution is to really nationalize these issues because what you're looking at this particular case in Iloilo is actually a national issue. So I think ang always key there to us, a good story is a good story, hindi namin tinitignan ang metrics. We know that it's an important story. We strive to give a fresh angle in the sense that we would like to engage more readers, and we're really happy that our partners are publishing PCIJ stories because that's the design of PCIJ. We syndicate our stories for everyone to republish. We're very happy with that, and we're really very happy na nire-republish, and it gets a lot of comments. Pero makikita mo yung impact sa ground talaga when your experts, your sources will contact you na ganito nga siya. It's not a new issue but it's really your patience in looking into the details so you understand why this problem persists. So it's in understanding the problem muna before we can introduce a solution, di ba? We can talk about contractual health workers being abused all the time. But if we don't understand how it happens, why it persists, we cannot offer a solution. Di ba merong solutions journalism? It's we can also move towards that solutions journalism week. So meron naman tayong makitang solution sa mga ills of society that we are covering. It helps journalists, even us, kasi pare-pareho yung stories natin minsan, di ba? And it helps to also look into this angle, the solutions.
I want to ask you rin, Carmela, because kayo NGO, di ba? Let's be, di ba? NGO, you're doing journalism also. But speaking of NGO, what are the models out there that you're aware of? Maybe kayo rin, Carol, baka may alam rin kayo, where we don't just limit collab with media. Diba? I know, speaking of solutions journalism, there are collaborations between media and journalists and NGOs. Diba? There are collaborations between media and foundations because they're experts here. They've been doing that and so on. How does that work? And and ano rin yung, and what are some very good models I know when it comes to FOI, transparency networks, and so on, we're also collaborating. Those are not journalists, but these are more, these are some accountants, some people are really experts in this. How does that work? And at the same time, meron bang mga, may mga downside pa dyan? Meron din bang mga kailangan ma-flag dyan na mga, ingat din tayo?
It's really about looking for organizations, collaborating with organizations with common advocacies. No? For example, freedom of information, huge advocacy for PCIJ, huge advocacy for many organizations. Alam nyo naman ang PCIJ, basta't SALN. Pay attention kaagad ang PCIJ, di ba? Looking into the SALNs. But, access to information has been so difficult, and one of the projects led by Florine Simon, our training director and deputy executive director, yung practicing FOI. Hindi kasi sanay yung bureaucracy, diba, to release information. Unlike in the United States, you request, wala nang tanong. If it's covered by FOI, they release it. Here, the bureaucracy doesn't know how to release information kahit na it's the public's right to know kasi natatakot sila. They might lose their jobs if they release information, diba? But the realization really is we need to practice FOI. So we train also the bureaucracy to learn how to share information to the public. Kasi kung hindi sila sanay na ma-requestan sila, hindi nila alam kung paano mag-release. So we make it a norm to practice FOI. So in the workshop, it's not just journalists. In fact, the CSOs, the training is to practice FOI. And sometimes it's a successful story. They go to their local government units, they get the information. Sometimes it's not so successful. They go to the municipal hall, hindi binibigay sa kanila basic contracts, no, or basic information that should be made available. And then we come together, report what happened. So it's FOI practice. They report what happened to the request, and then we learn from each other. So yung iba namang nagpa-practice na ng FOI, they can suggest how they can go about the challenges. Kung hindi mo makuha sa ganitong office, maybe you should go to another office, or other tactics and techniques, no, how to get information that not just journalists but civil society and the members of the academy need in their work. So that's I think it's a great collaboration, and it's an advocacy really for us to teach the government, the bureaucracy.
Hanggang saan pwedeng umabot yung mga collab na ganyan? Hanggang saan pwedeng umabot yung mga collab na ganyan? Where media and in this case CSOs or NGOs, di ba? Parang kasi may mga iingatan ka rin dyan. Diba? Let's say it's not easy to say na, oh, I will collaborate with an environmental NGO. Diba? Because sometimes there are NGOs also that their advocacy is so strong that it also has a particular bias. On the other hand, they do have data, they do have information and data sets that are very, very objective that I want to get to. So hanggang saan pwedeng umabot yung mga collaboration na ganyan?
Editorial independence is supreme. At the end of the day, you are a journalist. If you have common advocacies, don't forget your roles. You're a media PCIJ is still a media organization, and we've had these conversations with partners that, you know, we want their data, but they cannot get copy of our
Wala silang
articles.
final say. Wala silang final say on the ano. Okay,
fact,
you don't pass the draft to them, and then they cannot get it.
Yes.
And then we put a disclaimer at the end na, for example, no, if we make a mistake in the report, it is our responsibility. It is PCIJ's editorial responsibility kasi wala nga silang say. I think that's what organizations, partners are also afraid of, na attached yung name nila sa story because they're funders, they are partners. So parang dapat makita namin yung content. But these are conversations we need to make with our partners. That
because Carol, this is a cut above, a typical journalist source relationship, di ba? I mean, very likely, in fact, you will approach sources na meron ka ng relationship. Some of these will be NGOs, some of these will be from civil society. But when you enter this kind of a collaboration, how is that different from the typical journal source relationship?
Ako yun? Actually, yung aming collaboration is more on the trainings, Rob. So, for example, on reporting the Bangsamoro, reporting violent extremism, etc. So it's more on the trainings really, and we decide on the design also.
Okay. Ito lang, comment from Weng Paraan. Weng says, is it possible to do something similar to the collaboration done in Check.ph? This time, election research. Check.ph, of course, a fact-checking consortium. We put this together for the elections. This involved also the academe, hindi lang media and NGOs as well. Can you picture something like that?
But Check is back, diba?
Hindi, pero ito ang inaano ni Weng is election research. Diba? So going beyond the fact-checking, and siguro this has to do with what we were discussing kanina, diba? Yung not everybody has the resource and so on. But in terms of, just putting together the voting history, for example, of politicians, diba? Baka pwede tayo mag-collaborate sa mga ganyan, diba? What do you think?
Yan yung gustong
Well,
mangyari ni Ma'am Melinda, di ba? Na we
Mm.
collaborate where we can, especially with limited resources.
Yeah.
Pero Jing, Carol, Francis, kayo, you're running newsrooms and you're the newsroom managers. Ano bang kultura ngayon ng mga newsrooms? I mean, not at the level of journalists, because as I keep saying nga, yung mga journalists di katulad ng panahon natin that we all go to base, and therefore your community is really built around base. But I think, I don't know how it is in the regions, the provinces, the communities, but in NCR, I did observe that. And I think because of traffic, because also of technology, a lot of the reporters, the young reporters I know, they really centered on the beats now. 'Di ba? Parang yan na yung culture nila. It's not so much built around the base, it's really built around their fellow yung mga kasama nila sa nagpo-cover. But on the level of the newsroom, ano ba yung kultura? Do you still have to protect your own resources from let's face it, competitors? Or even with something like elections, and even with something like wag ko corrupt, that brings us all together on the same page, what is possible from a cultural standpoint? Parang kailangan ba ako magpaalam sa'yo, Boss Jing o Boss Carol, meron tayong kakompetensya pero hinayaya ko para ang ganda ng project, pwede kaming mag-collab.
Jing?
Actually, mas open na ngayon sa collaboration and partnerships ang newsroom namin. That's, I think, one of the silver linings of our
sundutin ko lang yun, Jing. Sundutin ko lang yun, Jing. Is that a real change? Was there a fundamental change in that thinking? And what triggered it? What triggered it?
We knew, I saw it in 2019, I think, when we were already very pessimistic about the franchise battle that we would face in 2020. And then, of course, last year, it was more apparent. Yung competitor naman, it's really more centered on TV. But we've always been open to collaborations with, say, PCIJ. We've had projects with PCIJ. I've loaned reporters to them on some occasions. Of course, on the regional level, it wasn't as pronounced as before because we did have regional stations, diba, that were pretty well established. But of course, when we were planning for our election coverage, the first thing that came to mind really was that we need help in covering the regions. And we need to reach out to people like Francis and Caroline to pursue partnerships, to make sure that we have something to offer you guys. And I know that we can do with a little help covering communities where you are. So, ganyan ngayon. Actually, yung tinatawag na network wars, matagal na naming hindi naman yan nasa consciousness masyado, no? Even before we were shut down. It's just that really, nasa social media din kasi yung competition eh. You know, makikita mo sa mga social media accounts. Pag naiwan ka sa, for instance, sa Twitter post, di ba? So, sisingilin mo yung reporter, gano'n naman. Ganun pa rin, ano? Yung competitive drive, I guess, will never really go away because we're journalists eh. Gusto natin palaging nandun pa rin yung una at tama yung balita mo. And I don't think any self-respecting reporter would feel good or would feel wala lang kung maiskupan siya, right? Ganun pa rin naman yung some things never change, and those are fundamental things that drive any journalist. But as far as our newsroom is concerned, we've been open to collaboration since 2-3 years ago, and we've been seeking partnerships every elections since I think the early 2000s. We are open to working with our colleagues in the industry. Marami na tayong nagawa with others outside of ABS.
Jing, I was actually preparing with one final question, no, to invite you, Jing, Carol, and Francis for your final words. Kaya lang something that you said triggered parang may tanong sa akin. But siguro I'll try to use that to frame the final question pa rin. Diba? Kasi sabi mo, no self-respecting journalist will still want to get outscooped. Diba? Mahalaga pa rin yung una at tama. This entire afternoon we've been talking about ano ba yung tama? Diba? What's the proper thing to do now that we're trying to deepen conversations? Now that we're trying to put the voter at the center of the campaign and not the candidates. And so, I mean, take it any way you want, but I think part of my question actually has to deal with that. When we talk about scoop, mahalaga pa ba yung una? Or mas mahalaga yung tama? Diba? Because I'm also, nandun na rin ako sa point na ewan ko kung talunan lang talaga ako sa social media na talaga hindi ka naiintindihan and therefore surrender na lang ako. Di ba? Mahina talaga ako mag-Twitter, mahina ako mag-TikTok, hindi ko naiintindihan yan and how to be first. But I'm also of the school of thought na actually I can never beat Twitter. Di ba? And somebody will always beat me to it. I remember when Dolphy was in hospital, di ba? That was a long time ago. And we were all getting heckled on social media na, oy! Patayin na, ba't ayaw nyo ilabas?
Because we never reported it.
Yeah, that's right. Because, but we told ourselves, no, hindi pa nagsasalita yung pamilya.
Yeah.
Di ba? At hindi pa nagsasalita yung ospital. And therefore, it doesn't matter what you're all saying. Doesn't matter if a celebrity tweets it out. Ang mahalaga sa atin yung tama. Di ba?
Yes.
So, I'll use that to craft. How do we resist that? Because I'm not trying to stand high and mighty over everybody else. I think I have those instincts as well. Ay, ayan na eh. Ano ba kayo? Ano ginagawa ng mga reporter ko? Nagte-trending na. Di ba? Ba't wala pa yung balita natin? Di ba? But how do we resist that against our better instincts and to remind ourselves what Wag Po Corrupt essentially is telling all of us? That we want to do the best that we can, the best journalism that we can do and we can provide. How do we resist the urge and to tell ourselves na mahalaga pa rin yung una, mahalaga yung tama, di ba? But there's that thing that also runs against that. So, I don't know. Ikaw kasi, Jing, I blame you, Jing, kaya ang haba ng tanong ko. Dahil magpa-final question na talaga ako. But how do you resist that and then bring us back to the values that we said paninindigan natin sa Wag Po Corrupt? I'll give each of you a minute kasi we're running out of time.
Kami, Rob, kasi yung orientation talaga namin, hindi naman that we be the first eh. Talagang we will not sacrifice accuracy dahil lang gusto namin mag first, no? So mahalaga sa amin na tama kami. So we can actually be the last word. Yun.
Francis?
Our part, nung kabataan ko pa, siguro hindi naman tayo magkasali yung mga edad dito. Nung kabataan ko pa, siyempre, yung competition talaga with other outlets, organizations nandun, lalo na sa radyo. But in the long run, minsan natitisod ka din eh. You get the wrong info, you get to run the wrong story, sometimes the wrong context. So, masakit sa dibdib yun eh. Lalo pag pinupuna ka ng reader. So, siguro sa katandaan na rin through experience that you get to analyze things from the perspective na okay, mauuna ka nga eh, sasabihin mo may namatay, so ano ngayon? Ano naman yun para sa inyong audience? What do they get from that? So you might as well na sige, pwede mong i-break, but the following or the follow-up should really something na meaty, something na may kinalaman sa buhay ng tao. Talagang need to know basis kumbaga. Lalo na sa print. Okay lang yung broadcast, minsan ang broadcast they can do faster follow-up. But when it comes to print, we've been very careful about that, especially sa social media, and particularly sa election. And we need to amplify issues sa local to get national attention na rin because these are also very important things especially ngayon mag-election na. So parang ganun po. Ingat, I mean the temptation is always there but the better part of us is that prudence always pays.
Ako naman, Robbie, you know, ang lagi nating our guiding principle has always been when in doubt, ask. Okay? Ask your superiors, ask the desk, ask your producer. No, it's very tempting to post anything, no, to post breaking news on social media. But in ABS-CBN, we have a very strict set of social media guidelines that prevents our journalists from being too trigger happy with anything that breaks. No, so medyo mahigpit kami sa social media posting of breaking news and on other information. Aside from that, I think it's also important for our journalists to keep on believing that it's not about us being first. It's about us getting the news right for the public because that's the reason we exist after all. Kasi di ba, bakit ka ba nakikipag-unahan? It's for you eh. It's because it satisfies your ego, it satisfies your need to be a winner. But the real reason we do this is the public, the citizens, those who are going to benefit from any piece of news or information that you put out there. So if that is the driving force, I mean, if that is what drives you as a journalist, then you won't go wrong.
Yeah.
And hindi ka basta-basta magkakamali dahil lang nagmamadali ka or trigger happy ka or, you know, padalos-dalos ka at hindi mo pinag-isipan ng mabuti. There is wisdom in prudence, as Francis said, and there is also a big advantage to your audience if you are careful, if you vet your story and your report properly, and you just follow the values that you've always adhered to in making, you know, good journalism.
I'll admit I asked this question because I also suspect that when we talk about putting the voters at the center of our coverage and not the candidates, just reminding ourselves that being first is not the be-all and end-all of this, that immediately allows you the luxury of time. And it allows you actually the ability to have that time to put the voter at the center of what you're going to tweet or of what you're going to write. I think the value of being first always lends itself to putting the candidate at the center of your coverage because they can say anything and pabilisan lang tayo mag-transcribe ng gusto niyan sabihin, di ba? But I think when we take that value out, it just adjusts our brain ever so slightly and it reassures us na teka muna, ano yung sinasabi nito? Magpapaisa ba ako dito o ano ba yung ano? Something that Carol said, no? They're not first, their attitude is to be the last word. I believe in that. Kaya yung podcast ng Puma-podcast ang title Teka Teka, di ba? So you'll allow me that little bit of plugging as well for myself. We're looking forward to collaborating with PCIJ and Mindan News and The Guardian and ABS-CBN and everybody. We're in this with everybody in wanting to collaborate and to cooperate and to keep the spirit and the mandate of Wag Kukurap alive in all of us. So maraming salamat. It was my own pleasure as well to be here. Thank you, Jing. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Francis and Carmela. You're still there, so I'll take this advantage to hand off to you with my thanks for having all of us. Maraming salamat, Carmela, and congratulations on the National Investigative Journalism Conference.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Ma'am Jing, Ma'am Carol, Francis. This session, though, is really what we want everyone to take away from this conference. When we organize this, wag kukurap talaga yung closing plenary because ito yung ating agenda setting.
Carmela, one last lang pala ha, dahil baka
Go ahead.
yung dati kong boss. O nga pala, in line with everything that we talked about, CMFR, Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, is extending their invitation to everyone in here listening in collaboration with Ateneo School of Government. The significance of covering elections, it will focus on 2 underreported themes, election laws, and 2, the election automation process. This is also a part of the Wag Ko Corrupt campaign. Anybody interested, they may reach out to CMFR through Geraldine Pascual.
You forgot the date.
Okay.
You forgot the date, Rob.
Hindi nakalagay dito sa comment eh.
May email yata si Melinda about this, I think.
But anyway, you can go to the CMFR page. You can follow them, and you can also email the organizers of this conference, and they will be happy to direct you if you want to participate. That's going to be on December 2 to 4, mornings of Thursday to Saturday. Yeah.
Don't forget also on November 30, please.
Yan. Gusto ko yan.
4 to 6 p.m. is there a Solid South Philippines 2022 to 2028 and the role Mindanao plays in tipping the balance of electoral outcomes. This is in partnership with IMS. Robbie?
Okay.
Thank
Carmela? Thank you again.
So we've gathered ourselves, wag ko corrupt. So we hope we will have more activities in the news, MFR with Ateneo School of Government, and we will organize more meetings, mag-uusap pa ang mga organizations because we're very serious about the pledge. And yeah, so kasi hindi nga ito yung ending, dapat may continuous pa yung lessons from the succeeding sessions of Wag Ko Corrupt. And yun, wala na akong may dadagdag pa sa lessons from the sessions. We will now bring this second national conference on investigative journalism to a close. We are very thankful to everyone. You made this conference very successful. It's been very engaging. Imagine 7 sets of breakout sessions, total 21, aside from the opening session, opening plenary, and this closing plenary. Tonight we will have Solidarity Night with the fellows. We will end with a new recording of Malayang Balita, composed by Rom Dongeto and performed by Scarlett Brown. So nag-record siya ng bago for us for the IJ conference. But before that, let us take this opportunity. We invite you na to visit the conference website, pcij.org /IJConPH 2021. In the following days, we will be uploading some of the presentations and we'll digest some tips from the breakout sessions. Ang daming very useful tips for journalists in the coverage. We also take this opportunity to invite you to follow PCIJ's Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram pages. Watch out for investigative reports, a lot of collaboration with journalists, and for opportunities to join future training and workshops. Sobrang salamat. And at this point, I want to congratulate Deputy Executive Director Florine Sibon. Pwede bang magpakita si Florine dyan? Who organized this 3-day event.
Congrats, Florine.
Congratulations sa ating training team. Grabe talaga the hours they put into this conference. Shali, Pearl, Rachel, Martha, Kier, Derek, Aaron, Andy, Tonyo. I don't know if I hope I did.
Show your faces, please.
Oo nga, show your faces. Utos ni Ma'am Carol.
Thank you.
Florine.
So that we can properly thank you. Thank you talaga.
Busy pa. Camera shy ating training team. Maraming salamat. So we'll see the participants tonight. For the rest of you, we leave you with this new recording of Malayang Balita by Scarlett Brown for our the record niya. So we're very happy. Enjoy. So we enjoy the music and see you again at the 3rd National Conference on Investigative Journalism. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat.
A re-election is a reckoning for democracy. As journalists reporting on another critical moment for our country, we have a duty to provide accurate, reliable, and essential information that will empower voters and encourage public discussion and debate.
Affirming that election integrity is not just about credible counting of votes, but about clean, level, legal, transparent, and accountable campaigning. Credible elections need credible media. Conversely, corrupted media can further corrupt politics. Citizens need issues and debates to be clarified, not simply amplified.
We pledge to put voters and the integrity of the electoral process at the center of our reporting. Focus on issues, not just on personalities. Examine the track record and qualifications of candidates and political parties vying for public office, and hold them accountable for the veracity and honesty of their every statement and promise.
Cover as responsible and accountable the institutions mandated to ensure an even, orderly, and credible electoral playing field. Stand in solidarity with each other when any journalist or news organization is harassed by state agents, political parties, candidates, or private groups for their evidence-based journalism. Be accountable to the public. We will hold each other to higher standards of impartiality, credibility, and integrity.
In line with these principles, we commit to challenge and correct statements and claims that have no basis in fact, avoid highlighting or amplifying falsehood, hate speech, and incitements to violence.
Report on the partisan activities of government officials, including those working for national and local agencies, the courts, law enforcement, and the armed services. Monitor the independence of the Commission on Elections, the courts, the military, the police, teachers, and all other individuals and entities involved in the conduct of the election.
Highlight the efforts of public and private sectors to uphold the honesty and integrity of our elections, monitoring vote buying, campaign spending, and the use of public funds to win elections.
Contextualize reporting on surveys and the winnability of candidates. We will not report on surveys without verifying the polling data, the track records of the companies conducting the polls, the methodologies used, and the questions asked. Focus on voter education, citizen participation, and empowerment.
Organize and report on town halls and debates and encourage candidates and citizens to take part in them. Uphold codes of ethics and professional conduct and disclose potential conflicts of interest.
Make a clear distinction between reportage and opinion. Promote safety, public health, and security protocols for and among journalists, and be mindful of the impact of our work on the safety and well-being of the people and communities we interact with in the course of our reporting.
Share best practices, knowledge, and experience, and raise our individual and collective capacities and competencies in covering elections, as well as the politics, issues, policies, leaders, and people beyond the elections.
ba? O nabasa mo na? Sino ba ang nagsabi? Ano ba ang nangyayari? May balita, may balita. Sino ang titindig? Ano-ano ang panig? Sino ang magbabantay sa kulang at labis? pusa lang nagbabalita. Kung himbing ang balita, may pusa lang nagbabalita. Ipikit ang mata, tikom ang bibig, sarili muna. Dahil ang tao ang kwento, iyan ang kwenta ng kwento. Kung sila ang balita, mas totoo ang balita. Ang tiwala ng bayan, ang ating sandigan. Kaya nating harapin, kahit peligro o banta. Kung ang balita ay malaya't matapat, ang bayan ay malaya't maulan. Makipot man ang daan sa malayang pamamahayan, titindig isang hanay, sama-sama sabay-sabay sa malayang balita, sa malayang balita. Ang tiwala ng bayan, ang ating sandigan. Kaya nating harapin, kahit peligro o banta. Kung ang balita ay malaya't matapat, sa malayang balita, ang bayan ay malaya't maulan. Sa malayang balita, ang bayan ay malaya't maulan. Sa malayang balita, bayan ay malaya't maulan.
Recording stopped.